The Druid is a shapeshifter and wielder of the elements that can be a bear, a wolf, summon wolves, or just be a regular old dude and pass some wind, I guess. But today we're going to go through my Stormcaller leveling build for the Druid. Let's go! Let me know in the comments what Druid build you're running. So firstly, shout out to Debat for helping me put this Druid leveling build together. As a one-man show on the YouTube, it's hard to level all the classes and get these guides out in a timely manner, and he has been a huge help to get some of this footage and put this video together, so shout out to you, Debat. Alright, so let's start with our overview of the Druid. So the Druid is a versatile class. Now, they don't have a whole lot of ranged options outside of what we're talking about in this build, and that's sort of why I wanted to go with this route, as most of the Druids, you know, are focused on that shape-shifting into a bear or a wolf and that sort of thing. And I thought that having something a little different in this sort of style that's a bit more focused on the elemental, especially like the tornado skill and using some of the companions, I think that this is a solid build. Now, the Druid's main resource is Spirit, and Spirit sort of operates similar to Mana, and Druids are sort of in a weird spot at the moment. Like, they're a versatile class because you've got sort of like the wolf for sort of a DPS focused damage sort of class, and the bear, which is sort of more tanky sort of a setup. This is obviously dependent on your build, and then, you know, the elemental sort of more mage style of skills. And the Druid at the moment is sort of weak, and they're also a little bit slow in terms of their movement, but there is a lot of fun to have with the Druid because of that shape-shifting and different ways that you can interact and make versatile builds. So the build we're going to go through today is a solid ranged build that's a little bit tanky, has some consistent damage, and pretty easy skills to sort of get used to and use. And that's sort of the main focus of leveling builds, right? It's about teaching you how to play the game and play the class, and not perform like a perfect skill rotation for maximum damage at like level 25, like some of the builds out there. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. All right, so let's get into the skills for this build. So your basic skill here is going to be Storm Strike, which will channel electricity to the enemies surrounding you, but it's not really the main focus of this build. It's mostly just to sort of generate your spirit, as well as do a little bit of damage and apply some vulnerability once you do grab into the Fierce Storm Strike. But we're really focusing on Tornado. That's like your main damage dealer. So you conjure up a swirling tornado that deals X amount of damage, and you want to level up Tornado as your primary and grab the Raging Tornado so that when enemies are hit, they have a chance to become vulnerable, which increases the amount of damage they take by 20%, which is a key issue for the Druid, is sort of dealing out enough damage, and anytime you can apply vulnerability is a good thing. In terms of passives in the core skills, there's a few here to pick up, but for the most part, you don't worry about them until a bit later down the line once you've got some skill points to grab. So Heart of the Wild to increase your max spirit, Abundance for your basic skill generating more spirit, which is obviously important, Wild Impulses, your core skills cost more spirit but they deal more damage, and then Predatory Instinct, so critical hit chance against close enemies is increased. Defensive skills are definitely important, and Earthen Bulwark is the key one here. So this creates some rocks around you that create a barrier which will absorb some of that damage coming towards you. Especially in leveling builds, I personally find that having some sort of a defensive skill is hugely important. Once you get into the end game, you can, you know, min-max into some sort of offensive capability, but when you're playing solo or playing in a sort of a leveling aspect and fighting some of these main quest bosses, which can be tricky, having a defensive skill like Earthen Bulwark is super critical to have. And once you've got the skills available, you can enhance this and grab Preserving Earthen Bulwark so that you can grant some of your base health as Fortify when you trigger the ability. Moving on to the companion skills, now we are picking up wolves here. So this will summon 2 wolf companions which will follow you around and sort of attack anything that you do have. So just passively they will attack, but if you activate their skill, they will focus on whatever target that you are focusing on and deal extra damage to them when you do have that. Now you want to upgrade these by enhancing them as well as grabbing Ferocious, so your wolves attack have a 10% chance to fortify you, so further increasing your defenses, which is important. Moving to the Wrath skills, we're continuing with sort of our storm setup and going to grab Hurricane, so you can form a hurricane around you that'll deal damage to enemies over time. You can enhance this and grab Natural to further increase your chances of applying vulnerability to targets. The last ability, I'll give you a little bit of like personal preference. You can sort of pick whatever, but Trample seems to be the most consistent thing that people are running because it makes you become unstoppable and it will knock back targets. So definitely grab that, and you know, it does incorporate some of that shape-shifting elements of the Druid, but you could go into something more sort of earth specific or something like that, you know, to fit with the Earthen Bulwark that we're using, but Trample seems to be the most consistent way that people are using. It's also another defensive skill, which is important as well if you're struggling with survivability. And moving on to some passives, Elemental Exposure, so your storm skills have a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable, and Endless Tempest increases the duration of Hurricane, which is also important. Now, as you get further into the ultimate line, we're not running an ultimate here, but there's heaps of passives that you can pick pick up like Defiance, Circle of Life, Resonance, Defensive Position, Unstrained, and Nature's Resolve. And down into the last, into your key passives, the main one is Perfect Storm. So Storm skills will grant you 1 Spirit and deal increased damage to enemies that have Vulnerable, Immobilized, or Slow, which is what a lot of our abilities are doing, and then you get that extra damage from that. Moving on to the class specialization, the Druid is really unique in the Spirits of Boon. So this class specialization sort of unlocks at level 15. You'll have a quest to go to the Spirits of Lost Grove, and once you've done this quest, you'll have these Spirit Boons. Now, these Spirit Boons, you'll need to collect Spirit Offerings to give to these specific things in this location, and once you've done that, you'll get various passives to sort of pick up and unlock the various passives that you can sort of get from the Spirit Boons. Now, here the main one is really the Wolf Spirit that I would sort of focus on, and especially grabbing Energize, so dealing damage has up to a 15% chance to restore some of your spirit. In the Eagle Spirit, you could also grab Scythe Talons to increase your critical strike chance, or in the Deer Spirit, Wariness to reduce the amount of damage you take from elites is also sort of valuable. But if you're wondering what one to focus on, probably the Wolf Spirit, or maybe the Eagle is maybe the ones that I would consider to be the most critical, though Deer does have some good passives in there as well. But Snake seems to be the one that's most lacking in terms of which ones to focus on. Moving on to attributes, your main attributes is Willpower. This increases your skill damage, your healing received, and overpowered damage, but the key is skill damage, so make sure you're looking out for Willpower on your gear. For other gear, like if you see some things that have Intelligence or Dexterity, they're also not bad for this class. Intelligence for resource generation, so Spirit, and Dexterity for crit strike chance as well as dodge chance, but Willpower should be your key focus. When you're putting gems into your gear, look for Topazes to increase your basic attack damage. For armor, Rubies for maximum life isn't bad, and jewelry, honestly, anything that gives you resistance, like the diamonds for all resistance, is probably fine. Now, for legendaries here, this build does function pretty okay without legendaries, and that's the interesting thing with druids, I guess, is that they are pretty legendary dependent, especially the bear and the wolf sort of a builds, but you can get away in this leveling build without having legendaries. But if you have anything that buffs like your tornado or your storm strike, those sort of a skills, absolutely grab those from the Codex of Power if you do get them, or if you find them, definitely grab them and put them into your rings or amulet as you replace them the least, or as you want to replace your weapons as much as possible. Some quick tips for the druid. Now, druids are naturally pretty tanky, and especially when you're looking at some of the skills we're using here, but if you're struggling with tanky skills, definitely invest further into the Earthen Bulwark or some of the defensive postures sort of early on sort of skills. Grab elixirs and use them for the extra XP that you get. You get extra XP for 30 minutes, and the other passives don't matter too much just while you're leveling up. The druids naturally aren't a very mobile class, so positioning is really important here, so make sure you're avoiding a lot of the telegraphs on the ground and sort of consider your movement much more regularly than you would some classes like a rogue that can just zip around the battlefield with really no regard for any life. While playing as a druid as well, you've got a lot of different weapon options like two-handers and things like that. Now, I would consider equipping 2 one-handed weapons, say a totem in your offhand and like an axe or a mace in your main hand, because it gives you 2 different legendary slots, right? Because you're holding 2 different weapons, whereas a two-handed weapon takes up both slots for only 1 weapon. So it's just something to consider depending on the build and sort of what you're working on. There is obviously two-handed weapons that'll be better, but having 2 one-handed weapons is often better to have. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.